He didn't expect a simple bump to change everything. A powerful businessman, a boy with a camera, and a retired police dog. What seemed like just another day at the park would soon become the beginning of a scandal no one could hide. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, like and subscribe so we can continue creating stories like this one. Liberty Square in Madison, with its well-maintained gardens and historic architecture, was bustling with life on that sunny Saturday morning. People strolled peacefully, enjoying the mild weather that was rare for that time of year. Among the visitors, Tommy Oliver, a 12-year-old boy with bright eyes and an easy smile, skillfully maneuvered his wheelchair between the craft stalls. Beside him, a small box of homemade sweets made by his mother, Mrs. Margaret, attracted the attention of passers-by. "Chocolate fudge and coconut treats made fresh this morning," he announced enthusiastically, while adjusting the small camera attached to his wheelchair, a gift from his older brother, Nathan, a computer engineering student at the State University. A few yards away, Rusty was resting under the shade of a centuries-old tree. The German Shepherd with golden fur observed the movement around him attentively, as if still on duty. After 8 years dedicated to the State Police Department, Rusty now lived in peaceful retirement under the care of Sergeant Jack Thompson, who at that moment was enjoying coffee on a nearby bench. On the other side of the square, a man in an impeccably aligned navy blue suit and gleaming Italian shoes walked hurriedly while talking on his cell phone. Edward Mitchell, 45, was known in Madison's business circles as one of the most influential businessmen in the real estate sector. His name frequently appeared in the social and economic columns of local newspapers. "I don't care what the board said, Marcus. I want those documents on my desk by Monday." Edward was speaking in an authoritative tone while gesturing nervously. "If that project isn't approved, you know very well what might happen." The conversation seemed tense, and Edward, completely absorbed in his matters, wasn't paying attention to where he was going. His path crossed directly with Tommy's, who at that moment was trying to reach a piece of fudge that had fallen from his box. The inevitable happened in a matter of seconds. Edward, without looking ahead, bumped into Tommy's wheelchair with enough force to almost topple it. The boy grabbed onto the wheels tightly, narrowly avoiding a fall, while his box of sweets shattered on the ground. "Watch where you're going, kid," exclaimed Edward without even stopping, adjusting his suit as if he had been the victim of the incident. "This isn't the place to be selling this junk." An uncomfortable silence hung over the square. People who witnessed the scene looked on with disapproval, but no one dared to intervene. Edward Mitchell wasn't just any businessman. He was a man with powerful contacts in the mayor's office and the state government. Tommy, with tears in his eyes, began to collect the sweets that were still intact, trying to salvage what he could from the morning's work that had barely begun. That's when a low, deep growl cut through the silence. Rusty had gotten up. His ears were erect and his eyes fixed on Edward Mitchell. Years of police training had sharpened his senses, and something about that man had awakened his instinct. It wasn't just the rudeness to the boy. It was something more, a scent he recognized from his old operations. Sergeant Jack immediately noticed the change in the dog's behavior. In almost a decade of partnership, he had learned to trust Rusty's instincts more than many of his human colleagues. "Rusty, what is it, boy?" murmured Jack, abandoning his coffee and approaching the animal. The dog kept his eyes fixed on Edward, who was now quickly moving away toward a black Audi parked at the corner of the square. Jack looked in the same direction and frowned. There was something familiar about that man, something he couldn't immediately identify. "Are you okay, young man?" asked Jack, helping Tommy collect the last sweets. "Yes, sir. Thank you," replied the boy, discreetly wiping away his tears. "I just need to sell these sweets to help my mom buy my medicine." Something broke inside Jack upon hearing those words. Even retired from the active police force, the sergeant had never lost his sense of justice. He observed Edward Mitchell getting into his luxury car, completely oblivious to the damage he had caused. "What's your name?" asked Jack. "Peter, but everyone calls me Tommy," replied the boy, adjusting himself in his chair. "Well, Tommy, I'm Sergeant Jack, retired from the police department, and this is Rusty, my partner, and we don't like seeing people being mistreated." While they talked, Rusty approached Tommy and gently licked his hand as if wanting to comfort him. The boy smiled, stroking the animal's head. "He's very intelligent," commented Tommy. "It seems like he understands everything." "More than many people imagine," replied Jack, looking thoughtfully in the direction Edward had disappeared. "Tell me, Tommy, do you happen to know who that man was?" "I don't know his name, but I've seen him on television a few times. My mom says he's a very important man in the city." At that moment, Jack noticed the small camera attached to Tommy's wheelchair. That camera. Was it recording when that man bumped into you? Tommy's eyes lit up. "Yes, my brother Nathan set it up to record continuously while I'm on the street. He says it's for my safety." Jack and Rusty exchanged looks, as if sharing the same thought. The retired sergeant felt a familiar tingling, that sensation he always had when he was about to uncover something important. "Tommy, would you mind if we took a look at that recording?" Far from there, Edward Mitchell entered his office on the 20th floor of a commercial building in downtown Madison. His face showed concern as he opened his briefcase and checked the documents inside. The folder contained modified plans of land in the Lakeside Park area and environmental authorizations with signatures that seemed official, but weren't. "It's all here," he murmured to himself. "If anyone discovers this..." He didn't complete the sentence, preferring not to verbalize the consequences. He stored the documents in his safe and took a deep breath. He was so close to concluding the biggest deal of his career, a luxury resort in an environmental preservation area, that with the right documents would be reclassified for commercial use. Edward had no way of knowing that his accidental encounter with a boy in a wheelchair in Liberty Square would be the beginning of his downfall, nor that a retired police dog would be the key to unraveling a scheme that he believed was perfect. The modest house in the Oakwood neighborhood was bustling that afternoon. Mrs. Margaret hurried from one side to the other, preparing a hearty coffee for her unexpected visitors, while her older son Nathan connected the small camera from Tommy's wheelchair to the worn laptop that he shared with his brother. "So you were really with the police?" asked Mrs. Margaret, serving coffee to Sergeant Jack, who was seated on the couch in the small living room. Rusty rested at his feet, but his attentive eyes followed every movement. "State Police Department, 12th Precinct. I retired 2 years ago after an injury in the line of duty," explained Jack, accepting the cup with a gentle smile. "Rusty also retired. He was my partner in search and seizure operations for 8 years. "I've never seen such a well-behaved dog," commented Mrs. Margaret, offering the animal a homemade cookie which was accepted with delicacy. Tommy watched fascinated while Nathan worked on the computer. The admiration for his older brother was evident in his eyes. Nathan, at 22, was the pride of the family. He had secured a full scholarship at the state university and worked part-time as a computer technician to help with household expenses, especially with his brother's medications and therapies. "Done, I transferred the entire video," announced Nathan, calling everyone closer to the computer. "Let's see what we have here." The recording began showing ordinary images of the square, Tommy selling his sweets, people passing by, the typical movement of a Saturday morning. Then came the moment of the collision. Edward Mitchell appeared on screen, talking on the phone, completely distracted until the moment of impact with Tommy's wheelchair. "Stop there," exclaimed Jack suddenly. "Go back a bit and increase the volume." Nathan obeyed, rewinding the video to the moment when Edward was speaking on the phone, seconds before the collision. "The Lakeside Park documents need to be ready. Cardoso is waiting for the licenses to sign the final release. If he discovers we altered the boundaries, everything will go down the drain." A heavy silence took over the room after those words. Jack had his brow furrowed, as if trying to organize information in his mind. "That man is Edward Mitchell, isn't he?" he finally asked. "Owner of Mitchell Enterprises." "I think so," replied Nathan. "He always appears in the news talking about his luxury developments." Jack nodded slowly. "There's a controversial project for building a resort in the Lakeside Park area near the lake. The area is partially protected by environmental laws, but there are rumors that there was an alteration in the demarcation of the preservation zone." "And what does that mean?" asked Mrs. Margaret, who followed the conversation with growing concern. "It means that this man might be involved in something illegal," replied Jack, increasingly intrigued. The question is, what are we going to do with this information? We should take it to the police, Nathan suggested immediately. Jack shook his head. It's not that simple. Edward Mitchell is a powerful man with many connections. We need more evidence before accusing someone of his position. What if we send the video to a newspaper? Anonymously, suggested Nathan. Also risky, pondered Jack. Without context or additional evidence, it could be interpreted just as a snippet of conversation without relevance. Besides, the press can be easily silenced when it comes to someone with Mitchell's influence. So, what do we do? Asked Mrs. Margaret, concerned about the implications of that accidental discovery. Before Jack could respond, Nathan's cell phone rang. It was a message from a university colleague who was interning at the Municipal Environmental Department. Lucas is sending me something strange, commented Nathan, reading the message. He says they're asking him to urgently digitize some environmental reclassification documents for the Lakeside Park area, but the signatures seem different from the usual ones from the secretary. Jack and Rusty exchanged looks as if sharing the same thought. The dog, who had been quiet until then, suddenly stood up, his ears alert. Nathan, do you think your friend could provide us with copies of these documents? Asked Jack, a plan beginning to form in his mind. I can try to talk to him, replied the young man, but wouldn't that be illegal? We're not asking for the originals, just copies for comparison. If there's something wrong with these documents, we need to know. While Nathan was messaging his colleague, Jack observed Rusty, who seemed restless. Years of partnership had created an almost telepathic connection between them. What is it, boy? You feel that we're close to something, don't you? Murmured Jack, stroking the animal's head. He seems to understand everything we say, commented Tommy, approaching the dog. How did he learn to be so intelligent? Jack smiled. Rusty is a special dog. He was trained to detect not only drugs and explosives, but also to recognize dangerous situations and suspicious people. I've always trusted his instincts. And what are his instincts saying now? Asked Mrs. Margaret, observing the animal with a mixture of fascination and concern. That we have something important in our hands, replied Jack. Something that could change many lives. Nathan turned his attention back to the group. Lucas will meet me tomorrow at the university. He said he has some copies of the documents and that he's also suspicious of some strange things in the department. Great, replied Jack. Meanwhile, I'll activate some of my contacts. I have a friend in the environmental police who can help us better understand the situation without raising suspicions. I'm afraid, confessed Mrs. Margaret. What if this man discovers that we have this video? He seemed so cruel when he pushed. Tommy? Jack placed a reassuring hand on the woman's shoulder. Don't worry, Mrs. Margaret. Nobody will know where this information came from, and I promise that nothing will happen to your family. In fact, he looked at Rusty and smiled. I think Rusty would like to spend more time with you, especially with Tommy. The dog, as if understanding what was being said, approached the boy and laid his head on his lap. Tommy smiled, caressing the animal's soft fur. That would be amazing, exclaimed the boy, his eyes shining with excitement. It's decided then, said Jack. Rusty will stay here for a few days while we investigate this situation. Consider him your personal guardian, Tommy. That night, after Jack said goodbye, promising to return the next day with more information, the Oliver family experienced conflicting feelings. On one hand, the fear of the unknown and the possible repercussions of their discovery. On the other, the hope that perhaps they could make a difference and, who knows, get some help for Tommy's treatments. Rusty, lying next to Tommy's wheelchair as the boy prepared for bed, remained vigilant. The retired police dog felt that a new mission had begun to protect that family and help uncover whatever Edward Mitchell was plotting. Far away, in his mansion in the Highlands neighborhood, Edward Mitchell was having a tense phone conversation. I don't care how you're going to do it, Cardoso. I want those signatures tomorrow. The auction for the area happens in 3 days and we need to have everything ready. Hanging up the phone, Edward contemplated the view of the illuminated city through his panoramic window. He was so close to realizing his biggest project, he had no idea that at that exact moment, thanks to an apparently insignificant bump, his plans were beginning to crumble. The following morning brought new discoveries. At the State University cafeteria, Nathan met with Lucas, his classmate and intern at the Municipal Environmental Department. The young man seemed nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder as he discreetly removed a manila envelope from his backpack. "Here, but don't tell anyone I gave you this," whispered Lucas, sliding the envelope across the table. "There's something really strange happening at the department. Secretary Alan Walker hardly ever shows up at the office lately, but documents with his signature keep appearing." Nathan carefully opened the envelope. Inside, he found copies of official documents related to the environmental reclassification of the Lakeside Park area, all apparently signed by the municipal secretary. "And what caught your attention?" asked Nathan, examining the papers. "The signatures," replied Lucas, leaning closer to point. "Look at this one from the February document and compare it with this one from yesterday. They're different, and this more recent one looks a lot like the signature of Edward Mitchell's assistant, who's always coming in and out of the department." Nathan photographed the documents with his cell phone. "Lucas, you're the best. This could be exactly what we needed." "What we needed for what?" asked Lucas, confused. "Nathan, what are you getting yourself into?" "It's better you don't know. Too many details right now," replied Nathan, saving the photos and returning the documents. "But believe me, it's something important. It could help a lot of people." "Just be careful," warned Lucas, putting the envelope away. "I heard rumors that Mitchell has heavy connections. He's not the type of guy you want to have as an enemy." Meanwhile, at the Oliver family home, Jack was returning from his meeting with Lieutenant Frank Dawson from the Environmental Police. His former colleague from the force had been visibly disturbed by the content of Tommy's video. "Good news," announced Jack as he entered the living room, where Mrs. Margaret looked at her younger son with pride and emotion. She wiped away a stubborn tear running down her face and nodded. "You're right, my son. We can't sell ourselves out like this. There are things more important than money." Jack smiled, admiring the family's integrity even in the face of such temptation. "So it's decided. We'll continue our investigation, but we need to be more careful now. They know where you live and are willing to pay a lot to silence us." "And what do we do now?" asked Nathan, absent-mindedly stroking Rusty's head, who had approached. "I think I have a plan," replied Jack with a determined gleam in his eyes. "But it will require courage from all of us." Mrs. Margaret was knitting while Tommy played with Rusty. "My friend in the Environmental Police confirmed our suspicions. The area that Mitchell wants for his resort is partially in a permanent preservation zone. Any change to this classification would need to go through a long process of environmental impact studies and public hearings." "And that didn't happen?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "Apparently not. He showed that there's no record of any public hearing on the subject. If the documents exist, they're fraudulent." Rusty, who had been playing peacefully until then, suddenly raised his ears and fixed his gaze on the window. A low growl began to form in his throat. "What is it, boy?" asked Jack, immediately alert. Before anyone could react, the animal ran to the front door, barking vigorously. Jack, driven by years of police experience, quickly followed the dog. When he opened the door, he saw a black car parked across the street. When the driver realized he was being observed, he accelerated and left at high speed. "They're watching us," murmured Jack, closing the door and going back inside. "How is this possible? Nobody besides us knows about the video." "Actually," began Tommy hesitantly, "I put a piece of the video on my social media last night. Just the part where he bumps into me and doesn't apologize. I thought people should know how he treats others." Jack and Mrs. Margaret exchanged concerned looks. "Tommy, on which platform did you post that?" asked Jack, trying to remain calm. "On TikTok, and it already has more than 10,000 views," replied the boy, proud before noticing the serious expression of the adults. "Did I do something wrong?" "Not exactly wrong, dear," replied Mrs. Margaret gently, "but it could be dangerous to draw that man's attention." Jack's cell phone rang at that moment. It was Nathan. "I have news," said the young man as soon as Jack answered. "Lucas gave me copies of the department documents. The signatures are forged. I'm almost certain." "Come home now," ordered Jack, his voice tense. I think we're being watched." Half an hour later, when Nathan arrived home breathless, the family gathered in the kitchen to discuss the situation. Rusty remained in the living room, vigilant, observing the street through the window. "So they already know about us?" asked Nathan after hearing about the mysterious car. "Not necessarily about what we discovered, but Tommy's video caught their attention," explained Jack. "Which means we need to act quickly." At that moment, the house phone rang. Mrs. Margaret answered, and her expression immediately changed. "Who is it?" whispered Nathan. He's asking about the video," replied Mrs. Margaret, her voice trembling. "He wants to talk to Tommy." Jack signaled for her to pass the phone to him. "Who's speaking?" he asked firmly. "Ah, I see we have an adult on the line now," replied a smooth and controlled voice. "My name is Thomas Meyer, personal assistant to Mr. Edward Mitchell. We are contacting you regarding a video published online that shows my client in an unfavorable light." "And what do you want?" asked Jack, keeping his voice firm. "Simply to resolve this situation in a friendly manner. Mr. Mitchell is deeply sorry about the incident and would like to offer his sincere apologies in person, along with financial compensation for the family. Let's say $10,000, a sum that would certainly help a lot with young Peter's medical treatments." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. How did they know about Tommy's treatments? "I'll consult with the family and we'll get back to you later," he replied curtly, hanging up afterward. "What did he say?" asked Mrs. Margaret, anxious. Jack reported the conversation, observing the family's reactions. $10,000, murmured Mrs. Margaret, her eyes moist. "That would pay for Tommy's treatments for years." "Mom, we can't accept that money," protested Nathan. "This man is trying to buy us off, it's obvious." "Your brother is right, Mrs. Margaret," agreed Jack. "Besides, they mentioned Tommy's treatments. That means they've already researched you, know who you are. They're trying to intimidate us." Tommy's gaze alternated between his mother and brother, feeling the weight of the situation on his small shoulders. "It's all my fault," he said finally. "If I hadn't posted that video—" "No, Tommy," Jack reassured him. "You didn't do anything wrong. It's important that people see how men like Edward Mitchell treat others." Nathan showed the photos of the documents he had taken earlier. "Look at this," he pointed. "The signatures are clearly different, and Lucas told me that the most recent one resembles that of Mitchell's assistant." "That would confirm the fraud," agreed Jack, "but it's still not enough. We need concrete proof, something that can't be explained away as a simple administrative error." "And if we—" began Nathan, but was interrupted by a sharp bark from Rusty. Everyone turned to the living room, where the dog was on alert, staring fixedly at the door. Seconds later, they heard loud knocks. Jack signaled for everyone to remain silent and carefully approached the door with Rusty at his side. Looking through the peephole, he saw two men in suits. "Oliver family," called one of them. "I'm Thomas Meyer, assistant to Mr. Edward Mitchell. We've come personally to resolve the video situation." "Don't open it," whispered Nathan. "Let's call the police." "They haven't done anything illegal yet," replied Jack in a low voice. "They just came to talk, apparently, but I agree it's better not to open." "We know you're in there," continued the voice. "Mr. Mitchell is quite anxious to resolve this misunderstanding. The offer is now $20,000 in cash. We just need the video to be removed and for us to sign a small confidentiality agreement." Mrs. Margaret's eyes widened upon hearing the doubled amount. $20,000 would not only pay for Tommy's treatments, but would also allow Nathan to complete college without having to work, and perhaps even a larger house, with more accessibility for her youngest son. "We'll give you some time to think," said the voice after the prolonged silence. "We'll be in touch again tomorrow. But remember, this offer has a limited time frame." They heard footsteps moving. Away, and moments later, the sound of a car departing. Rusty relaxed a bit but remained alert. $20,000, murmured Mrs. Margaret. "Mom, that money comes with a very high price," argued Nathan. "They're buying our silence." "Nathan is right," agreed Jack. "Besides, if what we suspect is true, Edward Mitchell is involved in environmental fraud. That would affect the entire community, not just a single family." Tommy, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. I don't want his money. He was mean to me and to other people too, I'm sure. The money won't make him better. Lieutenant Frank Dawson's office at the State Environmental Police headquarters was small but organized. Maps of the metropolitan area of Madison covered one of the walls with markings on preservation areas and ecological points of interest. On the central table, documents, copies of dubious licenses, and photos of the Lakeside Park area were spread out as the group discussed the next steps. I managed to access the original processes, explained Dawson, showing an official file. Any change in classification of protected areas must go through public hearings and technical consultations. There's no record of any of that for the Lakeside Park region. Jack, Nathan, and Tommy listened attentively. Mrs. Margaret had stayed at home under the protection of a retired colleague of Jack's, while Rusty accompanied them to the meeting, calmly lying next to Tommy's wheelchair. "So the documents that Mitchell has are definitely fake?" asked Jack. "Without a doubt," replied Dawson. "The question is how to prove that he was the one who falsified them, or better, how to get access to the original documents he's using." "I think I have an idea," intervened Nathan timidly. "If he's so desperate to buy our silence, we could use that to our advantage." Everyone turned to the young student, intrigued. "What if we pretended to accept the offer, set up a meeting to receive the money and sign the agreement? It would be an opportunity to see the original documents, maybe even photograph them." Dawson shook his head, concerned. "Too risky. Mitchell isn't naive. He wouldn't bring compromising documents to such a meeting." "But what if he didn't know it was us?" insisted Nathan. "What if someone pretended to be an employee interested in helping him get the licenses more quickly? Someone he doesn't know personally? An undercover operation?" Jack raised his eyebrows. "Nathan, that's work for trained police officers, not civilians." "That's exactly why I thought of Lieutenant Dawson," replied Nathan, looking at the environmental police officer. "Mitchell doesn't know you, right?" Dawson considered the idea for a moment. "That's true. We've never had direct contact. But a judicial authorization would be necessary for an operation like this, and we don't have enough evidence to get a warrant." "What if it wasn't an official operation?" suggested Jack. "Just an informal conversation, as a citizen concerned about the environment. We wouldn't be breaking any laws if we just talked to him." Tommy, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. "And what's my part in all this? I want to help." The adults exchanged concerned looks. The boy's courage was admirable, but the idea of involving him in any risky scheme was unacceptable. "You've already helped us a lot with the video," replied Jack gently. "Now let us handle the rest." "But it all started with me," insisted Tommy. "If it weren't for the bump and the camera my brother installed, we would never have discovered anything. I want to help end this too." Rusty, as if understanding the conversation, got up and rested his head on Tommy's lap, looking at the boy with his intelligent eyes. "See?" said Tommy, caressing the dog. "Even Rusty thinks I can help." Jack couldn't help but smile. The connection between the boy and the dog was something special, almost magical. "Maybe there is a role for you," he finally said, "but nothing that puts you in danger, understood?" Tommy nodded, excited about the possibility. "All right, let's outline this plan better," said Dawson, taking a notepad. "First, we need to find out when and where the auction for the area will be. If Mitchell is in such a hurry, it must be soon." "Lucas can help us with that," suggested Nathan. "He has access to the department's scheduling system." While they were discussing the details, Rusty suddenly raised his ears and fixed his gaze on the office door. Seconds later, someone knocked. "Lieutenant Dawson, the superintendent wants to talk to you. Seems urgent," said a voice from the other side. Dawson frowned. "I'm coming," he replied before turning to the group. "Wait here." As soon as the lieutenant left, Jack and Nathan exchanged concerned looks. "Do you think it could be about our investigation?" whispered Nathan. "Maybe," replied Jack. "Mitchell has powerful contacts. It wouldn't be surprising if he knew we were here." A few minutes later, Dawson returned with a grave expression. "We have a problem. The superintendent just informed me that he received a call from the municipal secretary. Apparently there was a communication failure between the environmental agencies, and the Lakeside Park area had already been reclassified months ago in a simplified process. "That's a lie," exclaimed Nathan. "Lucas assured me there was no process at all." "I know," agreed Dawson. "But officially there's now a document saying otherwise, with signatures from all those responsible, including mine." "What do you mean, yours?" asked Jack, alarmed. "Exactly. Someone forged my signature on an approval document. And the worst part, the auction for the area happens tomorrow at 10 a.m. at City Hall." The gravity of the situation fell like a weight on everyone. This wasn't just about an arrogant businessman who had pushed a boy in a wheelchair. It was an elaborate scheme of environmental fraud, involving forgery of official documents and, probably, the bribery of authorities. "We need concrete evidence, and fast," concluded Jack. "Without it, Mitchell will get what he wants." "I have another idea," said Tommy unexpectedly. "What if we used my video to get more visibility? We can make a new post with more details about what we discovered to pressure the authorities." "Public exposure," murmured Dawson, considering the idea. "It could work, but it could also put us at even greater risk." "I think Tommy is right," intervened Nathan. "Public opinion might be our best weapon now. If we can get enough people to share the video, maybe the press will become interested and start investigating on their own." "We wouldn't have to reveal everything we know," added Jack, "just enough to create doubts about the legitimacy of the auction." Dawson seemed divided. As a police officer, he preferred to follow official procedures, but it was clear that the system had been compromised. "What about the threats?" he asked, concerned. "Mitchell has already demonstrated that he's willing to go far to silence you." That's why we need Rusty," replied Tommy, petting the dog. "He protects us." Jack smiled at the boy's confidence. "He's right. With Rusty and some friends from the force keeping an eye on the family, we'll be safer. Besides, once the story becomes public, anything that happens to us will only attract more attention to the case." After more discussions, the plan was finally outlined. Nathan would create a more elaborate video, including excerpts from the original recording, explanations about the threatened area, and questions about the legality of the process. Dawson would use his contacts in the environmental press to give more visibility to the case. Jack would mobilize ex-colleagues from the police to ensure the family's safety. And Tommy, with his charismatic presence, would be the face of the campaign. The boy who, even in his wheelchair, had the courage to face a powerful businessman. When they left Dawson's office, it was already late afternoon. The sun was setting over Madison, tinting the sky with orange hues. On the way home, Tommy observed the city through the car window, thoughtful. "What are you thinking about, champ?" asked Jack, looking through the rearview mirror. "About how everything changed in such a short time," replied the boy. "Before, I felt so small, as if nothing I did mattered. Now we're about to save a piece of nature." Nathan put his hand on his brother's shoulder. "You were never small, Tommy. You just needed the opportunity to show your size." Rusty, sitting next to Tommy in the back seat, affectionately licked the boy's hand as if he agreed. Meanwhile, in Edward Mitchell's luxurious office, the businessman angrily faced his assistant. "What do you mean they refused the offer?" he shouted, banging on the desk. $20,000 for a family that barely has enough to eat." "They seem determined, sir," replied Thomas Meyer, visibly nervous. "And there's more. We discovered that they were at the environmentals. Police today talking with a Lieutenant Dawson." Edward turned pale. "Dawson? The same one who supposedly signed our authorization?" "Exactly," confirmed Thomas. "I think they're connecting the dots, sir." Edward stood up and walked to the window, observing the city that soon, he hoped, would have another of his luxury developments. "The auction is tomorrow," he murmured. "We need to ensure that nothing goes wrong until then. Absolutely nothing." "And what about the family?" asked Thomas hesitantly. Edward turned, his face a mask of cold determination. "Increase the offer to 40,000. If they still refuse, well, we'll have to be more persuasive." What Edward Mitchell didn't know was that at that exact moment, The video edited by Nathan was beginning to circulate on social media, gaining shares, indignant comments, and the attention of investigative journalists. A storm was forming, and not all the money in the world would be able to contain it. The morning of the auction arrived with cloudy skies over Madison. At the Oliver home, the atmosphere was one of tense expectation. Tommy's video had gone viral. Overnight, reaching more than 1 million views and being shared by celebrities and influencers with environmental causes. Hashtags like Tracha Mitchell Explain and Tracha Save Lakeside dominated social media trends. "It's working better than we expected," commented Nathan, showing the statistics on his cell phone. 3 TV stations have already contacted us wanting to interview. "Tommy?" Mrs. Margaret smiled, proud but apprehensive. The house phone had rung incessantly all morning. Journalists, environmental activists, lawyers offering pro bono services, and of course, new contacts from Edward Mitchell, increasingly. "Desperate. $50,000, she murmured after hanging up for the 5th time. "He's really desperate." Jack, who was monitoring the street from the window with Rusty by his side, shook his head. "The money is nothing compared to what he would lose if the auction were cancelled. We're talking about a project worth hundreds of millions." "Lieutenant Dawson called," informed Nathan, checking his cell phone. "He said that City Hall is in an uproar. The mayor has called an emergency meeting to discuss the auction." "That's good," commented Jack. "It means the pressure is working." Tommy, in his wheelchair, adjusted the tie that Mrs. Margaret had insisted he wear for the occasion. "Are we really going there?" he asked, a mixture of nervousness and excitement in his voice. "Yes," confirmed Jack. "Our presence at the auction will increase the pressure even more, but you stay close to me at all times, understood?" The boy nodded, serious. Rusty approached him, as if understanding the tension of the moment, and touched his muzzle to Tommy's hand. "Don't be afraid, Rusty," said Tommy, petting the dog. "We'll succeed." Meanwhile, in Mayor Paul Anderson's office, a tense meeting was unfolding. Edward Mitchell, visibly disheveled, gestured energetically. "This is absurd. A complete absurd," he exclaimed. "The entire process was legal, all authorizations are in order. We can't cancel the auction because of a viral video and unfounded speculations." The mayor, a cautious man in an election year, maintained a neutral expression. "Nobody mentioned canceling, Edward. We're just considering a postponement to clarify the doubts raised by public opinion." "Doubts? What doubts?" retorted Edward. "I have all the necessary documents, signed by the competent authorities, including the Environmental Department and the Environmental Police. Or are we going to govern based on hashtags now?" The Secretary of Environment, Alan Walker, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "The documents seem to be in order, Mr. Mayor. Although I admit I don't recall personally participating in all stages of the process." "See," exclaimed Edward, triumphant. "The Secretary himself confirms it. This is nothing but an extortion attempt by that family. First they refused 10,000, then 20,000, now 50,000. It's clear they want to harm me." The Mayor raised his eyebrows. "You offered them money?" Edward hesitated, realizing his mistake. "Only as compensation for the incident with the boy. A public relations matter, nothing more." "In any case," intervened the municipal attorney, "it would be prudent to verify all the documentation again before proceeding with the auction. If there are any irregularities, the city could be held liable." "There's no time for that," protested Edward. "The auction is scheduled for 2 hours from now. The investors are already in the city. Any postponement would cause incalculable losses." "Perhaps we should hear from this Lieutenant Dawson," suggested the attorney. "After all, his signature is on the approval documents." "That's right," agreed the mayor, relieved to find a solution. That would postpone his final decision. "Let's call him immediately." Edward Mitchell left the meeting furious, frantically typing on his cell phone. In the hallway, he found his assistant, Thomas. "We have problems," he murmured. "They want to verify the documents. Talk to Dawson. We need to act now." "I've tried everything with the family," replied Thomas. "They're not answering my calls anymore, and the video is only gaining more strength. It's already on TV." "Forget the video," cut Edward. "We need to ensure that the auction happens today at any cost. Call all our contacts in the press. I want an immediate counter-offensive, discrediting that boy and his family. I'll say it's an extortion attempt, that they're demanding money to withdraw the accusations. And find Cardoso. We need to ensure he keeps the story straight about those signatures. While Edward was conspiring, Jack, Nathan, Tommy, and Rusty arrived at City Hall. Their presence caused an immediate commotion. Journalists ran in their direction, microphones in hand and cameras rolling. Tommy, how does it feel to be an environmental hero? Is it true that Mitchell tried to buy your silence? Do you have evidence of irregularities in the licensing process? Jack protected Tommy from the press harassment, while Nathan calmly responded, "We're here just as citizens concerned about our city. All we ask for is transparency in the process." Rusty remained alert, always close to Tommy's wheelchair, like a faithful guardian. His imposing presence and impeccable behavior attracted admiring looks. "This is Rusty, a retired police dog," Tommy proudly explained to a reporter. He was the first to notice something was wrong with that man. The story of the hero dog was the perfect seasoning for the media, which quickly incorporated Rusty into the narrative. The scent of justice, how a retired police dog unmasked possible environmental fraud, announced an online newspaper in real time. Inside the City Hall auditorium, where the auction would be held, Edward Mitchell observed the group's arrival with a somber expression. Beside him, a middle-aged man in formal attire seemed equally concerned. "It's him, Cardoso," murmured Edward, "that retired sergeant who's leading all this confusion. And that must be the boy from the video." "And the dog?" asked Cardoso nervously. "Why did they bring a dog?" "It's a police dog, from what I understand," replied Edward. "But don't worry, it's just an animal." However, as he spoke, Edward couldn't disguise his own uneasiness. There was something about that dog in the way it observed the environment with almost human intelligence that deeply disturbed him. Mayor Paul Anderson entered the auditorium, followed by Secretary Alan Walker and Lieutenant Dawson, who immediately walked toward Jack and his group. "We've gained some time," Dawson informed them in a low voice. "The mayor is considering postponing the auction to better investigate the complaints, but Mitchell is pushing hard." "What about the fake signatures?" asked Jack. "I haven't had a chance to personally verify the documents yet," replied Dawson. "They're being brought from the municipal archive now." The buzz in the auditorium decreased when the mayor took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your presence. As you must be aware, some concerns have arisen about the environmental licensing process for the area in question. Therefore, before we proceed with the auction, I would like to completely clarify these doubts." Edward Mitchell immediately stood up. "Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, there is nothing to clarify. All documents were duly approved by the competent authorities. This postponement is completely unnecessary and harmful to the city's interests." "I understand your concern, Mr. Mitchell," replied the mayor diplomatically. "But given the repercussions of the case, it would be imprudent not to verify." "Repercussions?" interrupted Edward. "We're talking about a viral video and baseless accusations from a family that is clearly trying to extort me." An indignant murmur ran through the auditorium. Nathan, who was discreetly filming with his cell phone, captured every word of the accusation. "Mr. Mitchell," said the mayor, visibly uncomfortable, "I suggest you measure your words. We have representatives of the press here, and I have nothing to hide," exclaimed Edward, his voice increasingly altered. "I invested millions in this project, followed all legal procedures, and now they want to destroy everything because of a kid in a wheelchair and his manipulated video." The silence that followed was deafening. All attention turned to Tommy, whose face expressed more surprise than hurt. Beside him, Rusty growled softly, as if understanding the insult directed at his young friend. It was at this critical moment that the doors of the auditorium opened, and a municipal employee entered carrying a folder of documents, followed by Lucas, the intern from the environmental department. "Mr. Mayor," called Lucas, his voice trembling but determined, "I need to say something important about these documents." Secretary Alan Walker stood up, visibly nervous. "This is just an intern, Mr. Mayor. He has no authority to..." "Let him speak," interrupted the mayor, intrigued by the commotion. Lucas approached the microphone, taking a deep breath before starting. "My name is Lucas Pimentel. I've been an intern at the Environmental Department for 2 years. I've been observing irregularities in the reclassification process of the Lakeside Park area, but I never had the courage to speak up until I saw Tommy's video." Edward Mitchell stood up again. "This is absurd. This young man is not qualified to—" "Let him finish," ordered the mayor firmly. "The signatures on the approval documents were forged," continued Lucas, "including Secretary Walker's and Lieutenant Dawson's. I witnessed when Mr. Cardoso, Mr. Mitchell's assistant, delivered the already signed documents without going through any technical analysis process or public hearing." All attention turned to Cardoso, who visibly paled. Edward Mitchell, realizing he was losing control of the situation, made a sudden move toward the exit. That's when something unexpected happened. Rusty, the police dog who had been observing everything attentively, suddenly ran toward Edward, blocking his path. He didn't attack, didn't growl. He simply positioned himself between the businessman and the door, looking at him fixedly with his intelligent eyes. "Get this animal out of here," shouted Edward, taking a step back. Jack approached calmly. "Rusty senses when something is wrong, Mr. Mitchell. I've always trusted his instincts." "This is ridiculous," protested Edward. "Now we're going to base official decisions on the behavior of a dog." Lieutenant Dawson approached the table where the documents had been placed. After a quick analysis, his face transformed. "This is not my signature," he declared firmly. "I never approved the reclassification of this area." Secretary Allen, Walker, pressured by all the looks, finally yielded. I also don't recognize this signature as mine," he admitted, avoiding looking at Edward. Mayor Paul Anderson, understanding the gravity of the situation, made an immediate decision. The auction is officially cancelled, and a complete investigation will be opened into the entire licensing process. Mr. Mitchell, I suggest you remain available to the authorities for clarifications. Edward Mitchell, seeing his project crumble before his eyes, completely lost his composure. "You don't understand? This project would bring progress to the city, jobs, tourism, but you prefer to listen to a crippled boy and his mangy dog." The entire auditorium froze at those cruel words. Cameras and cell phones captured every second of the furious outburst. Edward, realizing too late his fatal mistake, tried to compose himself. I didn't mean." But it was too late. His true nature had been exposed in front of everyone. TV, cameras were broadcasting live, and his image as a respectable businessman was crumbling in real time. Tommy, surprisingly, was the one who broke the awkward silence. Moving his wheelchair toward Edward, the boy faced him with a dignity that made the businessman look away. "You pushed me in the square as if I were nothing," said Tommy, his clear voice echoing in the silent auditorium. "But it's not my wheelchair that limits me. It's your small heart that limits you." Spontaneous applause erupted in the auditorium. Rusty, satisfied that his mission had been accomplished, returned to Tommy's side, receiving affectionate pats from the boy. In the weeks that followed, the story gained national proportions. The investigation revealed an elaborate scheme of document forgery and bribery attempts involving not only Edward Mitchell, but also other businessmen and public officials. The resort project was permanently cancelled, and the Lakeside Park area was transformed into an ecological park with the support of environmentalists and the population. Tommy became a symbol of courage and determination. His story inspired other people with disabilities to speak out against injustices. Spontaneous donations came from all over the country, allowing him to access the best medical treatments and a state-of-the-art motorized wheelchair. Nathan received a full scholarship to complete his studies and a job offer at an environmental NGO. Mrs. Margaret was finally able to leave her second job and dedicate more time to her small sweets business, which quickly prospered with the fame acquired by the family. As for Jack, he received a special invitation from the Environmental Police to act as a consultant in environmental crime cases, bringing his vast experience and, of course, the invaluable help of Rusty. And speaking of Rusty, The four-legged hero of this story was officially adopted by the Oliver family. He earned a special place next to Tommy's bed, where he slept every night, always vigilant, always protective. The retired police dog had found a new mission, to be the guardian of a small hero in a wheelchair. On a sunny afternoon, 6 months after the events at City Hall, Tommy was strolling through the new Lakeside Ecological Park in his motorized wheelchair, with Rusty proudly trotting by his side. A plaque at the entrance of the park told the story of the preserved area and mentioned the names of those who had fought to protect it, including Peter Oliver and his faithful friend Rusty. "Frosty, you know, Rusty," said Tommy, stopping to admire the preserved landscape, "sometimes people think that being small or different means not being able to do anything important. But we proved them wrong, didn't we?" Rusty responded with a cheerful bark, as if perfectly understanding every word. And perhaps he did understand, for the bond between them transcended words. It was made of courage, loyalty, and the certainty that together they were capable of transforming the world around them. Dear listeners, we hope that Tommy and Rusty's story has touched your hearts. To continue this exciting journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on your left. If you like this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the power of hope. Share in the comments which moment moved you the most in this incredible journey of friendship and courage. We're looking forward to reading your opinions. Night had fallen over Heavenly Harbor, bringing with it a cool breeze from the river. Helen remained seated on the small porch of Mrs. Betty's house, her eyes fixed on the horizon, while her mind processed the revelations brought by Mark. The horse handler had left hours earlier, promising to keep her whereabouts secret, but not without first delivering a message from Jack. "I have proof. I need to find you." "Any problem, my child?" Mrs. Betty approached, carrying 2 steaming cups of tea. "You've had that face since that man left." Helen accepted the tea with a grateful smile. After 6 months of living together, she knew she could no longer hide the truth from the woman who had welcomed her as a daughter. "I need to tell you something, Mrs. Betty," she began, her voice low and determined. "My name isn't Lisa Sanders. My real name is Helen Mitchell, and the man I lost wasn't a simple traveler. He was August Mitchell, owner of New Dawn Ranch." Mrs. Betty's eyes widened, but Helen noticed there wasn't true surprise in them. "I suspected something like that," confessed the older woman, sitting down beside her. "The way you hide when someone from outside arrives, how you avoid talking about your past. And that magnificent horse, clearly not an animal for common folk. You knew and still took me, and protected me. It doesn't matter who you were, it matters who you are," replied Mrs. Betty with simplicity. "And the Lisa or Helen that I met is a good person. I never doubted that." Tears came to Helen's eyes. The emotion of finally sharing her burden with someone who truly cared was overwhelming. "There's more, Mrs. Betty," she continued, wiping away the tears. "August, my husband, he tried to kill me that day. He took me to the edge of a cliff in Eagle Ridge during the storm because he didn't want the baby. He didn't want an heir to his fortune." Mrs. Betty brought her hand to her mouth, horrified. "My God, child, how did you escape?" "Lightning," replied Helen, looking to where the black stallion rested under a nearby tree. "August's horse, for some reason I'll never understand, protected me. He interfered when August tried to push me, and in the confrontation it was August who ended up falling." A heavy silence followed the revelation. Helen expected to see fear or disapproval in the older woman's eyes, but found only compassion. "You didn't push him then? It was an accident?" "Yes. I was only trying to defend myself, protect my child. I never wanted him to—" Helen couldn't complete the sentence. Despite everything, the image of August falling into the abyss still tormented her in nightmares. And now, this man who came today, what did he want? Helen told her about Mark, about the supposed will, about the allegations that August was happy about the pregnancy, about Jack's suspicions. "I don't know what to think anymore, Mrs. Betty," she confessed. "If August had really changed his mind about the baby, why take me to that dangerous place? Why try to do what he tried to do. Mrs. Betty reflected for a moment before responding. When powerful men do bad things, there's always someone benefiting. Who would get everything? If both you and your husband disappeared? The question hit Helen like lightning. It was so obvious, but her mind had been so focused on August's betrayal that she had never considered the possibility of a larger conspiracy. Theodore, she murmured, the lawyer. He was always close to August's business dealings, always knew everything. And this Jack, what does he really know? Questioned Mrs. Betty. He said he has proof. Helen suddenly stood up, a decision forming in her mind. I need to find him. I need to know the truth for me and for my child. That night, Helen could barely sleep. Her mind was spinning with possibilities, with plans, with fears. By morning, her determination was firm. She would find Jack and discover what he knew. But fate had other plans. The first contractions began before dawn, waking her with their relentless intensity. The baby apparently had decided its time had come. The following hours passed in a blur of pain and determination. Mrs. Betty, who had helped bring dozens of children into the world in the village, took command of the situation with calm efficiency. Sebastian was sent to fetch the midwife while his wife Irene prepared hot water and clean sheets. At noon, between screams of pain and words of encouragement, a healthy boy came into the world, with strong lungs and dark hair like his father's. When the midwife placed him in her arms, Helen felt a wave of love so intense that all doubts and fears momentarily dissipated. "What will you call him?" asked Mrs. Betty, watching the scene emotionally. Helen studied the small face, recognizing August's features but also something completely new and unique. Michael, she decided. His name will be Michael. 4 days had passed since Michael's birth. Helen was slowly recovering, dividing her time between caring for the newborn and planning her next steps. Mark's presence in Heavenly Harbor meant that Theodore would eventually discover her whereabouts. She needed to act before that happened. It was on the 5th night after the birth, while nursing Michael in the silence of the early morning, that Helen heard a familiar whinny. Lightning, who always remained in the vicinity of the house, seemed agitated. Moments later, discreet knocks sounded at the back door. With her heart racing, Helen placed Michael in the improvised crib and headed to the kitchen, where she found Sebastian already awake, a hunting rifle in his hands. "Don't answer," he whispered. "It could be dangerous." "I need to see who it is," insisted Helen. "It could be important." Cautiously, she approached the door. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. "Jack, Mrs. Helen," came the response in a low voice. "I came alone. We need to talk." Helen exchanged a look with Sebastian, who reluctantly nodded. "I'll keep the gun ready," he murmured. "Any suspicious movement?" Helen slowly opened the door. There stood Jack, August's former foreman, looking thinner and more tired than she remembered, but with the same direct and honest look that had always inspired confidence. "Come in," she invited, stepping aside to allow passage. Jack entered, removing his hat as a sign of respect. His eyes quickly scanned the environment until they rested on Sebastian and his rifle. "I didn't come to cause problems," he assured, slightly raising his hands. "I just need to talk to Mrs. Helen. It's urgent." "It's all right," Sebastian said. "Helen, can you leave us to talk alone?" Reluctantly, the man agreed, but not before casting a warning look at the visitor. "I'll be in the next room if you need me." When they were alone, Helen indicated the kitchen table for them to sit. "Mark said you have proof," she began directly. "Proof of what, exactly?" Jack looked at her intensely before responding. "That Mr. August never intended to kill you, Mrs. Helen, and that the will presented by Theodore is fake." The statement was so contrary to everything Helen had experienced that she almost laughed. "August took me to the edge of a cliff during a storm, Jack. He tried to push me. I saw it in his eyes." "No, Mrs. Helen," Jack shook his head vehemently. "What you saw was a man realizing he had fallen into a trap. Mr. August received a letter that morning, supposedly from an old business partner, setting up a meeting at that specific point on the property. The letter mentioned a threat to your and the baby's safety. He decided to check the location before the appointed time, taking you with him because he believed it would be safer than leaving you alone at the headquarters. Helen felt her blood freeze in her veins. How can you know this? Jack took out a folded and worn paper from his pocket, extending it to Helen. This is the letter. I found it among his belongings after the accident. And this, he continued, removing another document, is the real will signed on the eve of the ride, leaving the entire ranch to the child who was to be born, with you as guardian until adulthood. With trembling hands, Helen examined the documents. The letter, written in elegant handwriting, detailed a threat against her and the baby, demanding that August come alone to the highest point of Eagle Ridge. The will, on the other hand, was clearly signed and notarized, dated the day before the tragedy. I don't understand, murmured Helen, confused. If he wanted to protect us, why didn't he tell me about the threat? And why did he try to push me off the cliff? Mr. August was a reserved man, you know that. He probably didn't want to alarm you in your condition. As for what happened at the cliff, Jack hesitated, choosing his words. Witnesses saw Theodore riding toward the ridge that morning. I believe he was hidden, watching, waiting for the right moment. Perhaps Mr. August saw him and tried to move you away from danger. The implications of what Jack was suggesting were monumental. If he was telling the truth, Helen's entire understanding of that fateful day would be transformed. August wouldn't have tried to kill her, but rather protect her. And the real villain would be Theodore, who orchestrated everything to eliminate both August and her, thus gaining total control of the ranch. Theodore has sufficient resources and influence to forge a will, continued Jack. He has contacts at the notary office, friends in the judiciary, but he didn't count on me finding the original document or looking beyond the obvious. And why did you do that, Jack? Questioned Helen, still cautious. Why care so much about discovering the truth? The man lowered his gaze as if ashamed. Because I was suspicious from the beginning, Mrs. Helen, I noticed how Mr. August changed after he learned about the pregnancy. At first, yes, he was reluctant, but in the last days, he was different. Lighter, almost excited. He talked about the future, about expanding the house, about building a true legacy, and mainly because he hesitated again, because Theodore offered me money to confirm that I saw him acting strangely in the days before the accident, to testify that he had mentioned not wanting the baby. A soft cry interrupted the conversation. Michael had awakened. Helen rose hurriedly to attend to him, returning moments later with the little one in her arms. Jack looked at the baby with a softened expression. He has his father's eyes, he commented. Helen studied her son, noticing for the first time the undeniable resemblance. The truth was beginning to settle in her mind, along with the enormity of what she would need to face. What do you suggest we do now? She asked. We need to take these documents to the district judge, replied Jack, determined. But it won't be easy. Theodore is powerful, has many allies. We'll have to be careful. Helen looked at the son in her arms, feeling a new strength growing inside her. She was no longer fighting just for her survival, but for her son's right, for the legacy that August apparently had wanted to leave, and more than that, for truth, for justice. Let's do the following, she decided, her voice firm. We need more allies. Alone we won't stand a chance against Theodore. Who do you have in mind? Asked Jack. Mark, to start with. He knows the ranch and seems loyal. And there are others on the property who can testify about August's change in behavior in the last days, but we also need someone with influence. Jack reflected for a moment before slowly nodding. Dr. Mendez, he suggested. The doctor who treated Mr. August when he burned his arm in last harvest's fire. He's respected throughout the region and never intimidated before anyone, not even Mr. August. Helen agreed. She remembered the doctor, an elderly man with firm principles who had treated August when he was injured, trying to save part of the harvest during an accidental fire. He visited me at the ranch a few times to monitor the pregnancy, she recalled. He seemed honest to me. He's the right man to help us, confirmed Jack. And if I may suggest, you should return to the ranch, not in hiding but openly with your son in your arms. The impact of your appearance, the boy's resemblance to Mr. August, that will cause a commotion that Theodore won't be able to easily control. The suggestion was frightening, but Helen recognized its logic. Fleeing and hiding had been necessary when she thought August had tried to kill her. But now, with the possibility that he had truly loved her, that he had wanted to protect her and their son, the scenario completely changed. "I'll need a few days," she said, looking at Michael, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "The baby is too small for a long journey, and I myself am still recovering." "1 week," agreed Jack. "I'll use that time to gather more evidence and prepare our allies. When everything is ready, I'll come for you." The plan was set. Helen felt a mixture of fear and determination, but she knew she had no choice. For Michael, for what could have been August's genuine love in the end, and for justice, she would face Theodore and his lies. A week later, exactly as agreed, Jack returned to Heavenly Harbor. He brought with him a comfortable carriage for transporting Helen and Michael, and encouraging news. Dr. Mendez had agreed to help them, and other employees of the ranch were willing to testify about August's change in attitude in the days preceding the tragedy. The farewell to Mrs. Betty was emotional. The elderly lady, who had become a second mother to Helen, insisted on preparing protection amulets for the baby and insisted that they return to visit her when everything was resolved. "You will always have a home here, my daughter," she assured, hugging Helen tightly. "You and little Michael." The return to New Dawn Ranch was as Helen and Jack had predicted, impactful. The carriage crossed the main gates at noon when the workers were returning from the field. For lunch, the sight of Helen, whom everyone thought was missing or worse, carrying a baby in her arms, spread like wildfire in dry straw. In minutes, a small crowd formed around the carriage. Familiar faces, some distorted by surprise, others illuminated by smiles of relief, surrounded Helen as she descended with Michael in her arms. "It's Mrs. Helen. She's alive. And she brought the boss's son. Look how much he resembles Mr. August." The comments multiplied, creating a buzz that grew with each moment. It was at this moment that Theodore appeared on the veranda of the main house, alerted by the commotion. His face visibly paled upon recognizing Helen. "What does this mean?" he asked, hurriedly descending the stairs, trying to maintain his composure. "Helen, I thought you were dead," she completed, her voice clear and firm, carrying Michael so that everyone could see the baby. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Theodore. I'm very much alive, and this is Michael, August Mitchell's legitimate son and heir to everything we see around." "Hus?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Theodore nervously looked at the faces surrounding them, seeking a way out of the unexpected situation. "Helen, what a wonderful surprise," he tried, forcing a smile. "We all thought you had gotten lost during the accident. Why don't we go inside and talk privately? You must be exhausted from the journey." "There will be no more private conversations, Theodore," replied Helen, standing firm. "Everything will be said here, in front of witnesses, including how you forged August's will to take control of the ranch." The lawyer's face momentarily contracted before recovering its mask of calm. "What absurdity is this? The will was duly recognized by the notary. August left clear instructions." "Forged instructions," intervened Jack, stepping forward with the documents he had shown Helen. "The real will is here, dated 1 day before Mr. August's departure for Eagle Ridge, leaving everything to his yet unborn son." Theodore laughed, a forced and nervous laugh. "And you expect someone to believe in a paper presented by the fired foreman? Please, this is ridiculous." "Perhaps they won't believe him," said a new voice, and everyone turned to see Dr. Mendez approaching. "But they will believe me. I was the one who witnessed the signing of this will. August called me especially for this, saying he had changed his mind about many things after learning about the pregnancy." The crowd began to murmur more loudly. Theodore looked from side to side, visibly cornered. "That proves nothing," he insisted, but his voice no longer carried the same conviction. "Helen could have forged this document after what she did to August." A tense silence followed the veiled accusation. Helen stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Theodore. "What exactly are you accusing me of, Theodore?" "Of causing August's fall. Interesting that you mention this. when we know that you were seen riding toward the ridge that morning?" More murmurs, now with tones of indignation. Mark, the horse handler, stepped forward. "It's true, I saw Mr. Theodore leaving early, heading toward the ridge. I thought it strange, since he rarely rode horseback." Theodore began to back away, his look now frankly frightened. "This is a conspiracy," he accused, his voice trembling. "You're all against me." It was at this moment that Lightning, the magnificent black stallion that had faithfully followed Helen since the day of the tragedy, stepped forward through the crowd, approaching her and the baby. The animal positioned itself at her side like a silent guardian, its intelligent gaze fixed on Theodore. The image was powerful. Helen, the baby in her arms, and August's horse, an unlikely trio that somehow seemed to complete a circle of justice. "I think Lightning also has something to say about who's telling the truth," commented Jack with a slight smile. Cornered, Theodore did what desperate people usually do. He tried to flee. He ran toward a horse tied near the house, but before he could reach it, several ranch workers blocked his path. "Not so fast, Mr. Theodore," said one of them, a burly man whom Helen recognized as the barn boss. "I think you have a lot of explaining to do." That same afternoon, the district sheriff was called. The evidence presented, the original will, the witnesses who confirmed August's change in behavior, the suspicious letter setting up the meeting at the ridge, the testimonies about Theodore's presence in the area on the day of the tragedy, was sufficient to initiate a formal investigation. Meanwhile, Helen resumed her place in the main house. The nursery she had started to prepare before the tragedy was finally completed, and Michael began to occupy the crib that his father had specially made for him, a fact that Mark revealed, further confirming August's change of feelings. The following weeks brought even more revelations. A search of Theodore's properties found documents detailing a plan to divert money from the ranch over the years. August, apparently, had begun to suspect weeks before his fall, which explained some of his secret meetings and distant behavior. The investigation also revealed that Theodore had hired a man to send the fake letter, and possibly to create a distraction at Eagle Ridge that would result in a fatal accident for the couple. But the plan had gone out of control when Lightning interfered, resulting only in August's fall. 3 months after Helen's return, the judge validated the original will, recognizing Michael as the legitimate heir to all of New Dawn Ranch, with Helen as legal guardian until his adulthood. Theodore, meanwhile, awaited trial in the county jail, accused of fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy. On a sunny afternoon, Helen sat on the same veranda where August used to contemplate his empire. Michael, now 4 months old, played in her lap, his eyes, so similar to his father's, absorbing the world around him with infinite curiosity. Lightning peacefully grazed near the house, occasionally raising his head to observe them, as if mounting guard. The black stallion, formerly known for his wild temperament, had become the constant protector of Helen and Michael, to the amazement of everyone at the ranch. "Your father would be proud," murmured Helen to the baby, caressing his dark hair. "He wanted you to have all this after all." Michael gurgled in response, his small hand grasping one of his mother's fingers with surprising strength. Jack approached, respectfully, removing his hat. "The new tractors have arrived, Mrs. Helen, and the expansion of the northern area is progressing as planned." "Thank you, Jack," she replied with a smile. As ranch administrator, a position that Helen had insisted he assume, Jack had proven himself as competent as he was loyal. As the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the vast fields of New Dawn Ranch with gold, Helen reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her there. From frightened wife to independent and strong woman, from victim to survivor, from fugitive to respected leader. The truth about August remained complex in her mind. The man she had known in the years of marriage, controlling, cold, calculating, contrasted with the man who had apparently transformed in the last days, excited with the prospect of being a father. She would never know for certain what had passed through his mind in those final moments at the edge of the cliff, but she chose to believe that in the end he had truly wanted to protect her. Lightning approached the veranda, his imposing presence, a constant reminder of the day that had changed everything. Helen extended her hand and caressed the animal's muzzle, feeling the inexplicable connection that united them. "Thank you," she whispered, as she frequently did when they were alone, "for me and for Michael." The black stallion softly whinnied, as if he understood. Life continued, with all its complexities and twists, and Helen Mitchell, who had once feared losing everything, discovered that her greatest strength was in her capacity to survive, to begin anew, and to build a future worthy of the son she carried in her arms. As the first stars appeared in the sky, she made a silent promise to Michael, to herself, and perhaps even to August, wherever he might be. New Dawn Ranch would be not just an empire of land and production, but a true home built on values that no fortune could buy. Dear listeners, we hope that Helen's journey has touched your hearts. A mother's determination to protect her child, the search for truth, and the courage to face the past are themes that resonate in all of us. To continue this emotional voyage, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it right here by clicking the icon on the left. If you like this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life, family bonds, and the surprising twists of fate. What did you think of the outcome? Had August really changed, or was it all a coincidence of destiny and Lightning's mysterious behavior? Share your theories in the comments. We're eager to read your opinions. Until the next story, where once again reality will prove to be more surprising than fiction.